I'd love to start by congratulating you on your nomination. It's great. I mean, you've been nominated twice before. You've won once before. Congratulations on having another nomination. And also congratulations on your relatively new ASC membership. Just a lot
Yeah.
of really cool things happening. Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to just jump right into it about how you shot 4 episodes of this season of Westworld. How did you get brought onto the show?
I got brought onto the show because Richard Lewis, who directed episode one, had directed the final episode of Penny Dreadful's City of Angels. And also the exec producer, Mark Toby, had done Penny Dreadful City of Angels. So I kind of just moved sideways, so to speak, onto Westworld. So I was very glad to do it because it's on 35 mil.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's very important to keep current and keep shooting on that. So it had been a little while since I'd last shot on film, but haven't been a clapper boy since I was 12 and shooting and like I was brought up with it basically. So it kind of came back very quickly.
Yeah, how long had it been since you'd shot on 35? Do you know?
About 5 or 6 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's awesome you
but
got to come back to that.
exactly, and I loved it, and I loved everything about it. To be honest, I love shooting on 35 minutes. Amazing. So, yeah, I hope to do it again soon. Now I'm kind of on the lookout for other projects now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully more shows will start shooting on film again as well.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think it's a great medium. I mean, obviously we kind of once we kind of exposed it and it got developed, it kind of ends up in the digital medium, which is I think a really good blend, between the two sort of formats.
Yeah. So, talking specifically about your nominated episode, what were some of the challenges?
Well, we kind of had to shoot a 1920s street at night with two characters, Aaron Paul and Tandy Wade Newton, basically walking up and down this street with cars that were constantly moving. And so it was a way. I suppose the hardest thing for me was to be able to light them really nicely, but at the same time still allowing the traffic to go by, and not putting sort of impediments in the way, and restricting the movement in terms of where you're going to put your lights to get some nice light on them. So that was a challenge, but I kind of came up with a way of putting lights on camera cranes and
Mm.
tracking along with them over the vehicles to kind of do that. And actually did an ASC masterclass last November a year ago, about that, actually, just in terms of the technique that myself and the grips, Paul Perkins and Russell Ayer, the gaffer, that we used in order to achieve that on a smaller scale, but just to sort of a similar sort of system.
Yeah. Was that something that you would come up with the
Yes.
script and gaffing team for that episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an evolution, right? So, I mean, I came up with it. Um, I used to be Philippe Rousselot's focus puller, and he had often used Chinese lanterns on Fisher sound booms,
Hmm.
to move them around people dancing in the dance floor. And when I was in Vancouver during the terror, we had a couple of locations that we couldn't get any big sort of genie booms into because of the weight restrictions on like dock sides and things like that. So I actually got a fixed camera crane that went, I think it was about 60 feet in the air, and put an octodome on the top of it, and was able to kind of use that as our sort of light source. So then I evolved that on Penny Dreadful. We had a similar situation in Universal where we were lighting on streets with period cars that always had to be on the move, people walking through the cars, wrapping around into close-ups, into wides. And so we figured out how to, Paul Perkins was my grip on that. So we kind of figured out a way of being able to drop in for close-ups and then coming out for wides, so you never really see the source for the close-ups.
Mm-hmm.
So we just carry that forward, and Russell was brilliant. He totally embraced it and came up with his own little ideas, which were fantastic for when we did Westworld. So it's an evolving thing.
So that sounds like a very challenging scene that really brought together the culmination of this knowledge that you'd been kind of building upon over the course of, several projects. Is there, anything else from the nominated episode that really stands out to
Yes.
you as something that you're super proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think we had whole sequences in the desert with very low sun, and we kind of planning our day around that over sort of 2 or 3 days to make sure we made the most of it. It's all about planning. Like, we spend our whole time chasing the sun, and in terms of, we had stuff to shoot in diners, and we always wanted to keep the detail outside windows and not blow them out and stuff like that. So, like, there's a diner scene in the desert where it's like we had that sort of Joshua tree sort of trees outside
Mm-hmm.
that we really wanted to keep the detail in. So it's kind of trying to find the balance between that and not making it look lit inside, the classic dilemma, that sort of thing, keeping it
Yeah.
nice and subtle. Yet again, film was a great medium for that. It kind of allowed us to kind of the highlights, there's a bit more detail in the highlights and things like that. And I suppose that episode, we kind of ended up in their sort of, in episode 3, in the sort of behavior lab in sort of Westworld back in the park.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much glass in that environment, and none of it moved or hinged. And so the biggest challenge there was not having, and we didn't actually, had no camera paint outs or anything like that. And actually, how to light in that environment was very difficult because, you'd put a light in there and it would be reflected.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of go, well, that looks like a film light. It's got an egg crate on it, and it's got like that. So I went to the production designer, and then we had it. They kind of had a series of strip lights that were running along the corridors and stuff like that. So I asked them, and they made me 6 8 by 8 sort of foot long strip lights that we could mount ourselves wherever you wanted to put some light that was reflected. And so
Okay.
whenever you saw it in the glass, it just looked like another light that was part of the set reflected. And so there's a lot of glass in Westworld in the set, so we kind
Mm-hmm.
of carry that forward into a lot of our sets. Anytime there was sort of glass, but like had really distinctive practicals, we would basically have our own made that we could mount and put in the reflected shot. Try and line it up so it looked like it was part of the same direction and all that sort of stuff, and then give us a nice quality of light, give us a nice shape on the face and stuff like that. So they were like some of the challenges. Like there was the glass. Paul had all of basically every panel of glass. We had it cut perfectly with black material. So behind the camera, you didn't have that double reflection.
Uh-huh.
But it had to be so neat because you could see even the smallest creases, and the dolly grips came up with lovely blackouts that fit over the dollies and the cameras perfectly. So everybody was wearing black, and
Uh-huh.
it was tough going, but worth it in the end. And as I say, we're really successful. There was no paint outs or anything like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I was lucky. I'd done a lot of stuff like that on the original Penny Dreadful in Ireland, when we had like a Hall of Mirrors scene to shoot with Ava Green, and it was like that was a very difficult scene to shoot, and sort of a lot of the tactics they used on that to try and hide the cameras practically, because yet again in that we didn't paint anything out. We were able to do that, and it's just a case of trying to find kick angles, see where things are reflecting, trying to block that reflection, and so on and so on, and
Yeah.
still keeping it that lovely feeling of knowing you're shooting through glass or at glass.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that sounds like, it really had to be all hands on board, whether, it's
Yes.
the grips and electrics or working in conjunction with PD in order to figure that out.
Oh
Um,
yeah, well they were
yeah.
great. They were great, and they always helped. Like John Carlos, the production designer, was amazing, and um, anything we asked for to help, he kind of made it happen.
Hmm. That's wonderful. So what's it like to be nominated for an ASC award for your work on this?
Well, to be honest, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe the first time, the second time, or this time. Like, I'm a fella from Ireland, and growing up, my dad is a DP, and like he'd have an ASC manual at home, an old beaten one, one of the original ones, and I'd always, as a kid, look at that. So it's kind of magical for me. It's kind of it doesn't really get any better. So for us, and also they're all my peers, so it is overwhelming. I find it overwhelming. And I just feel very lucky, to be honest. To be honest, I can't believe it. So, but I genuinely feel honored and lucky, and I, I think because it's other DPs,
Mhm.
and they all know what you have to go through to get stuff, and
Right.
you know, yeah, as I say, coming from Ireland to have 3 nominations is unbelievable, for me.
Yeah. It's quite impressive, as is your work. So congratulations. It's very much well deserved.
So I think, I'm always trying to work. I hate not working.
Hmm.
Um, and it's probably a bore for my family and for my partner Vaughn, but I love work. I'm work the whole time because I
Hmm.
love it. I just love it, and I don't always. So I work on small budget. If I can, if I'm waiting for something I particularly want to do, a series or something, or a film, rather than just wait for it, I'll just shoot. Even though for something way below the scale or whatever, just to keep shooting. I just love it.
Yeah.
So
That's ideal to love what you do for a living.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't believe that I get to go to work to make believe. That's what I find that, like, yeah, like sometimes, like overwhelming. I can't believe it, and I'm always waiting for someone like to knock on the door and say, "Listen, it's all a joke." You're going back to work in the building sites.
Uh, yeah, I mean that's wonderful that you've been able to have such a great career and that you're continuing to work so much. Yeah, I mean the last thing I want to ask you is just out of your fellow nominees this year, is there anyone whose work in particular has really inspired you? Anyone you want to give a shout out?
In my particular group, or overall?
Overall, yeah.
Overall, well, I'm very proud of. There's 2 other Irish nominees, Stephen Murphy and Kate McCulloch, in particular, for The Quiet Girl. She's nominated for a Spotlight Award, so I'm very proud of them.
Yeah.
Um, and I love Greg Fraser's work on the Batman, but I love I love Elvis. I think I just, that film blew me away. So Mandy
Uh-huh.
Walker's work in Elvis, I thought, was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of really spectacular films and shows this year. So, yeah.
Yeah.